You've landed inside Launch Street, the Business Innovation Podcast, where we interview top innovators out there shaking things up so you can innovate, differentiate, and get further faster. Since you're here, we know you're the type of person that recognizes the importance of unlocking your innovation advantage so you can compete and win. And now, your host, the person that has worked with leading companies like Disney, Procter & Gamble, Aero Electronics, the U.S. Army Research Labs, and Red Robin on upping their innovation advantage, Tamara Gontor.
Hello. Tamara here, your host on Inside Launch Street. What a wonderful day. And what a wonderful interview to bring to you today. I'm so excited for today. I think you're going to really appreciate this one. Before we dig in, I got a little request. If you haven't already, please do me a favor. If you get value out of this podcast, and I'm going to assume you do if you're spending some time listening to it, I know, and you know, I tried to provide you tremendous value in everything that we put out. But if you get that value, please go over to iTunes and leave us a review. Because here's the thing. More reviews equals more awesome guests, and more awesome guests equals more value for you. It's a wonderful cycle. So do me a favor, take a quick second, leave us a little bit review about what you get out of Inside Launch Street. I would so appreciate it. All right, let's get on to today's guest, Christine Matzen. So this is an interesting one because she's got this incredible dual career that I'll tell you about, where she started out in the super high-paced, super stressful environment and just took all the lessons there and parlayed it into leadership. And she had some really interesting insights around defining your daily practice and about not letting the world kind of take your time and your objectives away from you. I like this interview about leadership because it's not about process and culture. It's about you as a leader and how you can achieve your goals and how you can be stronger as a leader in the teams that you lead as well. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Christine. Christine is a medic at heart and worked in the emergency medical services for 17 years, where she developed strong instincts and leadership skills as a paramedic. See what I'm talking about? She worked in such a fast-paced, high-stakes career, and that gave her a deep intuition and respect for people. She continued her education in business marketing and obtained her master's degree in leadership and management. And today, she works with individuals to develop their own leadership style, focusing on honing a strategic mindset in conjunction with their unique skill set. So like I said, this is about how you individually as a leader drive harder, go further, and get more out of what you want in that leadership role and how you lead others. All right, enough said. Let's get to it.
Christine, thank you so much for joining me today on Launch Street. I have a feeling this is going to be a good conversation.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited. So tell me, what's the one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
I think one thing that's really surprising is that I have not actually eaten out in 7 years.
What?
I prepare all my own food. I am a super sensitive celiac. And I have learned along the way that I do not do well if I do not prepare all my own food. So for the past 7 years, I have not eaten anything that myself or my husband has not prepared personally.
That is amazing. So I have to know, I have so many questions now. So one is, do you have favorite recipe sites? Because I cook a lot. I eat out, but I do cook a lot, but I find myself really bored really fast with the same meals.
Oh goodness, you would hate my diet. I am on a very regimented, I eat a carnivore diet for the past 2.5 years. That was a progression from a paleo diet when I just was in a refractory state of celiac. So I ended up having to just get more dialed in, safer and safer and safer with the foods until all the grains were gone, everything was gone.
Wow.
And honestly, I haven't felt better.
Well, so. I give you, that's great. And I give you a lot of credit for really sticking to it. I think in our culture in particular, in America and a lot of the Western world, eating out, a lot of the world actually, eating out and eating together is a big social thing too. Like it's not even really about the food. So kudos to you for being able to stick to it. That's incredible.
Thank you. Yes, I always tell people, if you see me out and about and I'm the only one eating, don't feel bad for me. I don't feel bad about it at all. I've never felt better. And let me tell you what, no food tastes as good as being able to run and chase after my 2 little boys. So.
Yep. Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, that is 100% right. So it's funny that we're kind of starting with something a little bit personal because I wanted to start with your story your journey really, because I think it's a unique one. And I'd say probably not typical for people I interact with. So tell me more about working, so 17 years in the emergency medical services. And you talk a lot about that, kind of what taught you about leadership. So, I mean, that's a fast-paced, high-pressure environment. So will you just kind of walk us through that journey a little bit and what you learned from it?
Yes, absolutely. I started on an ambulance when I was 19 years old. I pretty much grew up in the industry. I started in driving the Medivan, being an EMT, and going on to become a paramedic. I ended my career as a clinical field supervisor. And I loved being a paramedic. I loved everything about it. It really did teach me a very deep respect for humans as a whole, and just the importance of us acknowledging people in their toughest moments. Even if you can't do anything about it, even if you know all of your tools that you have or whatever you have, that connection that humans have to actually just hold space for the hard is really something that I learned along the journey.
Let me ask you a question about that, because I think what you're saying here is really important about just acknowledging people in their toughest moments. And, I think whether that's, I don't know, maybe someone didn't make it through the, in your world, like in the medical world, like the stakes are high, right? And maybe they're not that high in a corporate world, but, you may have failed at something you tried, or you may have not gotten funding for something, or you just may have gotten kind of one of those discussions from your boss. It's like, you need to improve this, right? If you want to succeed here, kind of things. There's a lot of tough moments out there. What's your advice for acknowledging people in those moments? Because I think we have them, sometimes small, sometimes big, but often.
Yes. I think really recognizing that humanity is full of different things. It can be beautiful and amazing and wonderful and overcoming, but it can also be really ugly. And recognizing that sometimes ugly is okay, and just allowing that to be just that one moment can really give people the freedom to just get it out. And sometimes they just really need to get it out. Even if you can't change anything about the situation, just knowing that someone was there with you in a tough moment and didn't judge you and just allowed you to have that moment can really let people know how valued they are and how much you care about them. Because a lot of people don't want to hear the ugly. They want to kind of gloss over it and try to fix it. And some things just can't be fixed.
Well, and I think, kind of to what you're saying about being fixed, I think oftentimes, particularly as leaders, we try to have a solution. So if, let's say you got a tough talking to by your boss, or you didn't get a bonus, something, as a leader, we want to then swoop in and be like, yeah, but here's a solution. And kind of what I'm hearing you saying is sometimes you don't have to provide the solution. You can just be there, and that's actually good enough.
Absolutely. I think sometimes just acknowledging that it's okay to have that moment, and then maybe helping to spark inspiration so that the person can build that solution that is right for them. Because sometimes we want to give people a solution that works well for us in our lives, but it might not be the right solution for someone else.
I remember years ago, I was passed over for a promotion, and I was really upset about it. And that was one of my tough moments. And I remember my boss coming into my office and starting with, God, this must really be a bummer. Like, I'm sure like you're really frustrated. And I felt really, actually not good, but I think his presence there, acknowledging my frustration with the situation, my pain, was really powerful. But then he started into this whole, I was totally rooting for you. I can't believe they picked the other guy. And that kind of ruined the moment for me. Like the fact that he was trying to compensate for the bad news almost made it worse. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, if maybe his advice had been like, maybe this is an option for you to reevaluate and to really think like, was this what you really wanted? Or maybe you have something inside of you that you didn't go for because you were putting it all into this. Somehow spark something else inside of you that either makes you drive harder towards that goal for the next time, or even maybe leads you down a different path.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought it's almost like helping the person pivot versus trying to solve that one problem.
Absolutely.
Huh, interesting.
Absolutely.
I want to dig into the subtitle of your book. So the book title is Leader, but I want to actually start with the subtitle because it really spoke to me. And I have so many questions around it. And I wanted to break down a lot of different areas to it, but we'll start big. So the subtitle is The Journey to Become the Force Your Business Needs to Win. How did you come to think of it as a journey and becoming the force? Like, I think that's a really interesting use of language.
Yes. Well, I think that leadership is a journey. I think that people who really want to excel and become effective in leadership look at it as a lifelong endeavor of mastery. And they recognize that their failures and their mistakes and all the bad along the way is teaching moments. It strengthens their resolve. It makes them make the decision to actually do different the next time. I don't think anybody just wakes up one day and is like, I'm a leader, or, I'm born, I'm a leader. I think it really is a journey, and you're going to mess it up, and there's going to be hard, and you're going to have to overcome. And I think that really needs to be taught. Because I think far too often people think that they get a promotion and a job title, and all of a sudden they're a manager and they think, I'm a leader. And I think leadership is far more important and deeper than a title.
Yeah, I think the analogy I always use, and others do too, is, when a football player may be a great player, but that doesn't mean he's a great coach. That's a whole different set of skills. And in fact, most of the coaches in the NFL or even college maybe played football at one point, but they actually focused on their coaching skills for a long time, which is different, right? That's actually leadership. How do you think about, if I just got moved into a leadership title or elevated my leadership, how do I figure out what skills I'm good at and maybe where I need work? I think it's not as intuitive as it seems.
I think you're absolutely right. I have a process that I like to use that's called strategic contemplation. And it's where you take either a decision that you made, a conversation that you had, and you actually just take the time to walk it through. Find out the things that you did really well and the things that you didn't do well. And then try to think about the skills or the tools that you need to be able to do it better the next time. And as you do this, you get better at seeing what you need, where you can improve, walking it through, doing it the way that you wish you had done it. And I always tell people, write down anything that you don't know, anything you need to look up, anything that you don't feel confident in, and actually go out and find the answers. Because the more that you put into your tool belt, the better you're going to get.
It's interesting. I think oftentimes, how do I say this nicely? Actually, I can say it about me, which is probably true. So I can be very gregarious and outgoing and chatty, and I talk to a lot of people. And sometimes that's confused with good leadership, but it's actually not, right? Not always. Like sometimes I need to shut up and listen a little bit more to be a good leader. What do you think are some of the top mistakes or like inaccuracies we see around what makes a good leader?
I think that personality traits are not necessarily what makes a good leader. I think that
that's a great way to say it. That's kind of what I was saying, but not quite as articulate as you did. Yeah, keep going.
Right. I think that people don't recognize that you can have a lot of different personalities and be an amazing leader. And the way that you connect with people may be different. But I think that the more consistent you are, the more that you know yourself, your values, your principles, and exemplify those every day, gives people a trust in you, that they're capable of believing what you say and knowing that you're behind them. And then it's really crazy, but people really want to get behind a leader like that. They are really willing to put in the hard work and to bring their best when they feel like the leader has their best intention. Right. And so I think that the more we just are true to ourselves and know what our code for life is, and that we make decisions from that, it builds trust within our employees, the people that we interact with on a daily basis, our family, I mean, in every aspect of our lives.
So I'm curious about the word trust, because I appreciate it and love it. And I think it's one of those words that people throw around a lot, and it kind of shows up in different ways. And I'm just, as you were talking, I was reminded of a woman I used to work for who was not my favorite leader. And she was really good at leading up. So she masked her inadequacies to the people who, quote unquote, made the decisions. You know what I mean? But she was a horrible leader down. So she was posturing all the time. And it made it really hard to trust her. Even if she had my back, I didn't believe it, because I knew, right, that what I saw was her being more interested in making sure her bosses thought she was amazing than really being a leader to the team she led. What are some indications, or what are some leadership, I don't want to say traits, maybe it's actions that you think actually erode the trust? And then I want to kind of flip it after that.
Okay. Yes. Actually, anytime a person places blame or
right.
Puts the responsibility of actions on people that are a part of the team but not leading the team, I think that immediately erodes trust.
Yeah. What about the flip side? How do you take actions to get trust?
Yeah, and this is actually the easiest one to talk about, but the hardest one, I think, for people to do, and that is that the leader takes complete responsibility and accountability for the failure, while they share in all of the gratitude and amazement for the success.
Right. It's interesting. I have a colleague who just got hired as a CEO for this company, and about 6 months into the job, I texted him, just was like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, Mr. CEO, like how?" And it's a pretty big company, and he said, "I don't know. I feel like a CEO, you get too much credit and not enough of the blame." And I was like, "Huh, that's interesting. Like, what an interesting way." It's kind of what you're saying of taking full responsibility, which I think is what he was trying to say in his text, that like, you're just basically responsible on both sides. But I thought I thought that was an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. That absolutely is a great way to look at it.
One of the things in your book, Leader, you discuss is the importance of building, and this surprised me the way you said it, a vision of consequence in order to stay the course and build a life you love. What is a vision of consequence exactly?
Well, a vision of consequence is something that I teach people to build a vision of what they want for their life. And then I teach them to build a vision of consequence, which is basically whatever is causing them so much pain in their life that they really want to change. And I think all too often we think, we've set this goal and we're going to do it, but then, Facebook comes on and
right.
we're scrolling, we're distracted, or, we think, oh, I want to lose that 20 pounds, but, chocolate cake today, who cares? It's just today. And so the vision of consequence is basically what your life will be like if you don't stick with the changes or make the changes that you need when you don't meet your goal within a year or 5 years. And I teach people to be very specific and to really take the time to feel the emotions from that pain, to use, like when you're determining, is it really worth it for me to do this distraction or to have that thing that I'm not going to meet my goal? I think it's far too easy to say like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, when the pain point isn't present.
So I really want to dig into this because, as I'm sure it's probably part of the reason why you created this. We as humans actually are more likely to move away from pain than we are towards pleasure. We're kind of hardwired to, right? Like be like, pain, gotta move, versus like, that sounds nice. It's actually, otherwise you wouldn't have that piece of cake, right? Because you shouldn't,
right?
But you do anyway.
Absolutely.
And then, but the pain of not being able to put your pants on, right? Like button them up, that gets you to take action. So we're funny that way, I think, as humans. Will you walk me through or just share with me an example of a vision of consequence, to your point, that's specific? Because I actually think this is the part when we do future work, where we create strategic plans, where we create the life we want, whatever it is, this is the part that we actually miss, is the consequence.
Yes. Well, I know for me in my life, I was bedbound for 2 years when
Yeah.
I first was diagnosed with celiac disease. And changing your whole life and how you eat and being in a culture of, gluten's everywhere. Let's
Yeah.
just face it, it's
All
everywhere.
you glutens out there.
Yeah, right. And I mean, this was not an option for me. I couldn't have a cheat day. I couldn't
Yeah.
have like I'm going to slip up. So for me, that vision of consequence was really, I'm not going to be able to get out of bed and chase my son.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to do those. And I mean, food is everywhere. I can't avoid it.
Yeah. Like
My
we said,
family
it's
eats that.
sustenance and it's social.
Right. And so every time I would even be tempted, every time I would even think about it, I really would have this visual image of what that was come forward to me. And I would sit in that discomfort and that pain. I would say some emotional words that would really trigger that pain for me. And then I would decide that it wasn't worth it. Right. And I would just stay the course.
Wow, that's really, and that's so personal too. Do you think, or can you share an example of a vision of consequence that we could have maybe for work too in some way? Because I think, so the short of it is I had surgery recently and had a major setback in the recovery. And I totally get what you're saying. Like I had this consequence of, oh my God, if I don't get better, this is going to impact my life, right? And I've got two boys who are older. They're 11 and 15. I can't believe I'm saying that. They're 11 and 15. But like the idea of not being able to go to there's this thing called mom prom at my son's school where I get to take my son to prom. He's horrified. I'm excited. But, not being able to do that because I don't slow my roll and get back on track. I did too much out of the gate after surgery thinking I'm invincible. Turns out I'm not. Who knew? So I hear that and I'm trying to translate that to my business and my work too, because I want that same push in the other goals I have.
Right. And I think the strongest thing for that is time management. A lot of people have a really hard time because we have just distractions at our fingertips, right? I mean, you carry around a little computer that's always available. It's dinging at you 24/7 and it wants to take your distractions.
Oh my God,
I mean,
so
this
bad.
is very personal. I mean, to make this effective, it has to be something very personal that you want. Maybe you're in school and you want to get a certain grade. Maybe you're in the workplace and you want to get to the next level. You want to show your bosses, that you can complete a project. It has to be something that if you cannot complete it or do it, it's going to mean pain to you. And you need to really sit down and think about why it's going to cause you pain. And then every time that little Facebook ding goes off or the phone goes off or whatever it is that's taking your time and your attention away, you use this to keep you back on track. Is this really worth my time? Or should I get back to what I need to be doing?
Ooh, I really like that. I like that, asking yourself the question all the time as well, just to keep yourself on track versus I think one of the mistakes we make, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is we do these type of exercises or get training, even as leadership training once, and then we expect it to sink in and work. And then it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, that's why I really love this practice of defining yourself daily, because our culture and the way things work in our society is that now everybody comes to you.
Yeah.
They disrupt your time. They steal your concentration. And I don't know if you know who JJ Virgin is, but I was listening to an interview with her one time and she said something that was so profound to me that I wrote it down in my journal and I've never forgot it. And it was exposure equals preference.
What does that mean?
And so it means that the continued marketing and the more times that you're exposed to something, the more you begin to like it, the more it becomes normal to you and you actually begin to prefer it. And I think because we carry these little devices around where we can be constantly marketed to, we actually begin to have this liking for it. if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think what I hear you say, right, is that the more we do something, the more we get used to it, the more it becomes part of our practice. So the more I get distracted by Instagram, the more that just becomes part of my norm, right? Versus kind of the other way around.
And whether it's good for you or not.
Do you think, just kind of on this topic, do you think that we waste a lot of hours doing unnecessary stuff? That sounds so horrible the way I say it, but like how many hours do we really put towards being a good leader and getting our work done in the life that we want versus how many hours do we spend letting, to your point, other people take our things take our attention?
Right. I think that people would be really surprised when they do a time analysis. And if you do a time analysis to do it a couple of weeks apart, that you would be shocked to find out how many times your concentration is broken, how many times you find yourself just doing things out of habit, like picking up your phone or watching something or scrolling, and how much time actually passes every time that happens, where maybe you didn't even intend for it to happen. You just got bored. And people are very uncomfortable being bored.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think that these companies and platforms have gotten very crafty at hiring human behaviorists that actually really understand your neurochemicals and how they work and your neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
And they use that to their advantage. And they use things that are innately built into our human DNA to keep us safe, to keep us going, to do all of these things, to actually keep us constantly engaged.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't done a time management or a time analysis. I like the way you said that. But I have been very intentionally trying not to constantly, in between things, check Facebook or check Instagram. And I'm not totally crushing social media. I mean, I think there's some value to it in some ways. But it's interesting because the other thing I found was when I would do deep work and then I would say, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to check Facebook, right? That's going to be my reprieve. It doesn't allow me to rejuvenate. So I go back to my work not fully energized versus had I just sat down on the couch and meditated or closed my eyes or just taken a short walk for a second without any stimulus, I probably would have come back more refreshed. But social media, chatting, like all the other stuff doesn't actually, bench watching, whatever, it doesn't actually allow your brain or your body the chance to rejuvenate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you. I find that really taking a walk where I don't have any music, I don't have anything on, and I just let my mind wander is one of the best things I can do in the afternoon. And if I do that, I feel so refreshed. I really come back with like a sense of like, I can do it. Like I have it in me to like be able to complete my project. And if I don't do that, I come back exhausted. Yeah. I mean, you're just working for, another platform.
Right. That's right. Exactly. In your work, what do you see that stops leaders from innovating and keeping up with changing times?
I think this is a lot of what we've been talking about. I'll give you a little analogy. Say we have a runner and they're doing a race and, they're pacing along, they're doing great, and they're saving up for that last, short distance where they are just going to burst and they are going to run all out. And I think really what is so damaging to the leaders today is that we have started to reward that end time where we burst and we're giving it at our all, to where people think that should be the norm. That should be the all-in pace. They should basically be running everything all the time as hard as they can. And I mean, in a lot of the ways the metrics are set up in our large corporations, they actually value this. They basically tell you, like, you're amazing, you're a champion, like they reward it, right? But the truth is that as a leader, you need reserves. You need to have physical, emotional, you need to be able to build judgment in, and you need to be able to calm the chaos. So you basically need to stay at that pace, right? So that you can build this huge gas tank so that when you need to innovate, when you need to actually concentrate for a long period of time and really think through and make connections, that you have it in you to do.
I want to talk a little bit about the rewarding it, because one of my experiences has been as an A player, meaning someone who's highly productive. I get a lot done in a short amount of time and done well. And I'm not the only one out there like that. But what I found was not only was I rewarded with, look at you, you're getting it all done, but I was rewarded with more work. So it's almost like my disadvantage to get it done quickly and well, because all that did was create more work for me. And I think to your point, right, then I had zero reserves. And I think, do you have any advice just for leaders out there, just for their team, and kind of how to manage, to your point, that the reserves and like making sure that your people have what they need to get it done, but aren't overwhelmed or being rewarded for the wrong things?
Right. Yeah. This is the hamster wheel, right?
Yeah,
We keep
totally.
running as fast as possible. And then you think that you hit the end of the race and you found out you're just starting.
Yeah.
I think this is the hardest thing for people to understand, because they feel like if they push so hard and they do so great that they'll be rewarded, and they'll be rewarded in a way that like, okay, now I can take the break. But they actually find out that this is now expected to be the norm.
Yes.
And I think that really you have to set your own vision, your own priorities, because I think what happens is people stop taking care of themselves. They stop, connecting with people in their home life. It starts to not be as much of a priority. They aren't spending as much time with their kids. They aren't, heaven forbid they take a vacation, right?
Right.
That is frowned upon, or a sick day or anything like that. And I think that really recognizing that having a zest for life and having a life that you love is really, really important. And at work, all of these metrics are made to build performance and to build their reward.
Yeah.
And if you don't start making these decisions in your life and prioritizing things as you go, it's never going to be like that's the right time, because most people spend 40 hours to 60 hours a week at work.
Yeah.
And their pain point that they feel and the pressure that they feel is where they're at all the time. It's proximity.
Well, and I think you make a really important point there, that like we go, 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 go. And then that go, 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 go becomes the norm versus maybe a once in a while thing when there's something urgent or a deadline that got moved up. Like it happens. But that being able to handle that pace all the time is not realistic yet, to your point, what we're expected to do. And, it's interesting kind of what you're saying around boundaries. On one hand, my ex was horrible at boundaries and never took vacations. And, it was always because work was pushing and pushing and pushing. And I used to get really frustrated and be like, why don't you just tell them, no, you need the day off and you're not checking email? And he had a really hard time, but he still does. He'll admit this to you to this day, that he had a really hard time setting that boundary to say, no, I need to spend time with my family too, or I need to spend time with my kids, or I need a break, right? I can't go at this pace all the time. On the flip side, I had a client once when I was doing a consulting project. It was a food company who I will never forget. He went home at 4 every day to greet his kids after school. And he would say to people, I'm going home at 4, but after 6, I'm back online. So we can talk again today. I'll get back to it, but not between these 2 hours. And he stuck to it. And I never forget when he first told me that. And I was horrified. I was like, how can you possibly do that? Oh my God, what? But it made him a better leader and a better worker for his bosses, because he had that boundary and he had that balance, and he just happened to be brilliant at it. I think more of us are on the other camp, but I was always so impressed with him and his ability to say, no, these are my hours with my kiddos, and whatever serves you, right? It doesn't have to be your kids. It can just be going for a hike, whatever. But I was always really impressed by him, but I think most of us are in the other camp.
Yes, I think it's hard because our world is so set up now to be in the other camp. Yeah. And you really are this person who stands out in the crowd when you're doing things like, no, I'm going to set this time aside and all I'm going to do is be with my kids during that time.
Right.
And in choosing that, you become a better leader, but you also have to be strong in yourself to say, I'm going to go against the norm.
Well, that's
and
hard.
I'm going to be okay with it.
Yeah. How do you recommend someone do that? So let's say they're go, 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 go. They're listening to this podcast and to you, Christine, and they're like, yeah, I get it. I need to set some boundaries or I'm going to burn out in a ball of, fiery ball onto the earth. What advice do you have for them to kind of take some steps in that direction?
Yes, absolutely. They have to have their vision of what they want their life to be. And it needs to be very clear, and it needs to include anybody in their life that's in their family, their immediate family, their spouse, their children, and they need to build that out. And they need to know what actual success means to them. If it's a financial number, if it's how they feel at work, it needs to be very clear. Because like I said, proximity and pressure will take over if you don't know exactly where you're going and who you are. And you need to be ready to make these decisions. And I tell people it's really granular. It's in the moment, right? Like reorienting what's important in each moment and then aligning your daily repetitive activities to meet the vision. Because so many people think like it has to be an all or nothing thing. And really it doesn't. I mean, you can make some simple tweaks in your life and in your day and in the way that you use your attention to really make people around you feel valued and to make your amazing, like you've met the priorities that you have for yourself. It's never an all or nothing thing.
Really appreciate it. I just wrote it down what you said stuck with me about. If you don't have a clear vision, proximity and pressure take over. And it just gave me the visual of just constantly having the compass out and making sure you're headed whatever direction you want to head, which to your point is about the clarity, right? Of like, you need to know where you're headed. Because it may not be north, could be northeast, whatever. But to actually know that so that you can be like, that's a southwest decision. So I'm not going to take that. But if you don't know where you're headed, all of that stuff, you're right, just sucks the life out of you.
It does. And just really like having your own, it's like setting your own map and setting your own compass, because every day you're going to be making course corrections, right? The wind is going to be coming from a different direction. Something else is going to pop up. And in that moment, you're going to make the decision. And sometimes work is going to win because you have a big project and you really need to give your all. And in some days, your kid's baseball game is going to be the most important thing you do. And you're going to put your phone away and you're just going to cheer in the crowd. And in those connections and in making those decisions every single day, you'll find your strength.
I think the other thing that within that's maybe hard for some of us to admit, and I kind of went through this whole process, is the reality is, and you've been in the medical field, so you really get this. I'm not a brain surgeon. So whether I answer my email or not is not make or break in an hour. Like nothing is going to live or die by whether or not I do that in an hour. And sometimes it's hard to kind of admit that, like, hey, maybe I'm not, it's not that I'm not that important. We're all important in different ways, but hey, I don't have to be this on call to get what I need to get done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But I think that we live in a very heightened sense of urgency environment where we get the sense that everything is urgent. And I think that sometimes what happens is, people either handle this in two ways. They become very anxious and everything becomes very urgent. Or you meet these people who literally something terrible could happen right in front of them and they seem completely numb to it.
Right.
Like they can't even respond, right? Like you'll see this sometimes with employees and you're like, wow, that didn't even an alarm bell didn't go off there.
Right.
Hop into action, take initiative.
That's happened with my team. And I'm like, why are we not talking about this 4 days later? Don't understand.
Right. I mean, but our whole society, I mean, when you're working on your computer and CNN News is breaking in every 5 minutes to tell you about a tsunami that happened, somewhere else in the world, right in that moment, and everything is this high pressure, critical, everything's going to be the end of the world tomorrow, you really develop a false sense of urgency, or you become numb to it because you just can't stay in a heightened state all of the time. So really reorienting what urgency is and putting things into perspective. Because remember, your perception of things informs perspective.
Do you have some good tips or ways that you reorient that urgency? Because I do think hadn't really thought about in the way you were talking about it. It's not just our own ego of like, all right, nobody needs me for an hour or something in the world, but really it is, we live in this world where everything is instantaneous all the time and getting even faster, right? Like I can have my groceries delivered in 90 minutes. I can turn on CNN and see the news. And even if you look at the news, the language that they use. In fact, the other day I turned it on and they were talking the weather and it was like 3 million people under threat of a snowstorm on the East Coast. And in my head, I lived in New York City for 6 years. In my head, I'm like, yeah, because it's winter. I don't understand why we're having such urgency around a snowstorm. Like, no kidding, right? But that is the world we live in. So how can you help me filter what is urgent or important and what isn't?
Right. And I think that you were already doing it where you were saying to yourself, like, what is the difference between if I respond to this email right now, or if I do it, in an hour or two after I've fed my kids dinner and I've had this time to connect with them? Is anything going to change in that response? Because all too often we just get habituated to, we heard the ding, answer now. Right? Mm-hmm. Like it just becomes what we do. And I mean, every part of a business or a corporation, every person in that business is important. I mean, from the janitor on up, you need every part of that to work, to have an amazing spot. So, I mean, it's not to say that any person is less important, but I think just taking the time to evaluate what happens if I don't do it right now. Like, does it really matter if it happens now or if it happens in 2 hours from now?
It's embarrassing to admit, but I got into the habit of texting and driving for a while there. And I don't anymore. Don't worry if you're on the road with me. Because someone texted me something funny. I picked up my phone to respond. And my 15-year-old turned to me and said, does it really matter if you respond right away? And I had a moment. I was like, oh, not really. I mean, this wasn't about we were meeting. It wasn't like something like that. It wasn't life or death. It was just someone sent me to something funny. And my initial reaction was to pick up my phone and at least do a ha-ha back, right? And be quick about it because I was driving, got it safe. But, that moment made me realize now I don't even pick up my phone when I drive. But I needed him to be like, really, Mom? Like, really? Is that urgent?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it is our children that really point out what we need to hear, right?
Yeah, right, totally. And I just love asking yourself that question, like, is this, do I really have to respond right away? And not tricking yourself into like, no, I have to, but really thinking it through of like, do I really need to? Before we run out of time, where can people go to learn more and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm at oakstreetstrategies.com. And I also post on LinkedIn, and you can find me under my name, Christine Matzen, or oakstreetstrategies.com. And that's about it. I will not flood your email box with tons of emails. I post pretty much all my stuff on LinkedIn that people can either choose to engage with or not.
Oh, LinkedIn's great for that. All right, great. So, Christine, what's your final piece of advice for innovators on Launch Street?
I think my final piece of advice is to really do the Define Yourself daily practice. And it takes 5 minutes in your morning every day. Start the day with you, with your priorities. Know who you are, where you're going, and what you stand for before the rest of the world comes at you, so that you have a map and you have a compass to make decisions throughout your day. There's far too much that's coming in and not enough coming from you. So make it about you, make it very personal, and then set course.
I love it. Someone once said to me, your calendar, because that's where people suck your time a lot too, right? Especially at work. Your calendar is not a tool for other people to take your time. It's a tool for you to meet your objectives. And when I started to think about that, I started to block out time for myself, time for my work, like just because otherwise suddenly you're in meetings all day, which is a lot of people's gripe. But to your point, if I didn't know where I was headed for, I wouldn't even know how to block out that time. So Christine, I really appreciate what you're saying about having that clear vision and defining your day and what you're trying to accomplish. And then because then you really know what you're looking for. So this couldn't have come at a better time. So thank you for that. It has been fantastic having you on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for hanging with us on Inside Launch Street. If you know someone that is truly ready to unlock their innovation advantage, have them join you on Launch Street. Discover your innovation advantage. Build a team of high-performing innovators and ignite ideas and solutions that create massive impact. GOTO, launchstreet.com. Remember, innovators, if you don't take the leap, somebody else will.